As the mule team, led by one of the 12-year-old boys, pulled the canal boat by the tight outstretched rope, our careful naturalist turned canaler named John witnessed from the deck of the boat the intricate work of the canal boatman. As the calm waterway passed slowly by, John observed his captain raise a 2-foot-long brass object to his lips. With a strong blow, the canal horn bellowed out across the countryside and echoed over the rock embankment to their left. Captain Cost blew long and steady as the eerie sound resonated into the ears of the lockkeeper just ahead along the water-filled man-made ditch. With the bellowing of the canal horn, a main staple along the C&O Canal, the lockkeeper dropped his hoe or his implement, or rose from his supper table to rush to set the lock in favor of the incoming canal boat. When Captain Cost and crew aboard the Caroline of Williamsport pulled up to the lock, the door was open and ready to receive the fully loaded wooden craft. To enter the narrow canal lock required great care and expertise. There was little room on each side of the boat from the stone walls of the lock, so one misstep could damage the lock or sink the ship. And when you are steering a boat loaded down with 130 tons of coal, well, the momentum can cause the ship to exert a great force on the wall if a collision occurred. But if you went too slow into the lock, it would not make it into the slot, and thus the lock cannot function. However, if you went way too fast, you may not be able to stop the boat in time that's loaded down with all that weight, and it would plow into the next gate and would destroy the lock and its functionality. As John writes, the boat fit in the lock like a nickel in a slot, and great care had to be taken to make it fit. Captain Cost steered the boat with the tiller as the second in command, the large African-American named Pick, stood upon the bow and jumped ashore with a line. Pick quickly wrapped the rope around a snubbing post, and he did that twice. As the boat slid straight as an arrow in between the lock walls, Captain Cost gave the command to young Tommy, the tow boy, to stop the mule team. With that order, Pick tightened the rope on the post, and the heavily loaded boat came to a sudden stop just before the front of the boat hit the door on the opposite side. Perfection. Pick's skill of regulating the rope tightness to avoid the rope from breaking, plus the pressure of the confined water in the front of the lock working as a piston, plus the slight friction of the boat against the walls on each side, all came together to stop the boat. With the lockkeeper's careful eye, the boat descended to the next level as water poured from the lower door louvers and lowered the boat into the lock. The lockkeeper pushed the long door handles to open the gate. Tommy commanded the mules to move forward, and the boat was then pulled and left the lock. And as that was occurring, Pick leaped from the towpath onto the deck of the Caroline of Williamsport, and they were on their way. As the crew of our boat sailed onward into their new level of the canal, the lockkeeper returned to his meal sitting on the supper table, kept warm by his loving wife, who attended to the children living there along the canal. This was the life of a lockkeeper and his family, suddenly disturbed by a bellowing of a horn. A small price to pay for a nice home to live in and a nice plot of land to grow food for his family. Life was good along the C&O Canal. And life was indeed good on the C&O Canal. Today we travel a small stretch of that canal as 4 Germans. So I have my buddy Dakota Stein with me. Stein's last name is German for rock or stone. I have my cousin with me and good friend Ben, and his last name Berman has German roots of dealing with farming, or sometimes it was meant poor man. And my last name, and I have my dad with me also, is Brooker. And our German roots of our last name means the people who live by a bridge. And on our journey, we will discover architecture, religion, old ruins, nature, industrialism, aristocracy, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and race riots, and lots of them, as we four Germans travel Irish country in search for a drink. So our 5-mile journey begins on the 184.5 mile long C&O Canal today, here at Lock 56. Now, Lock 56 sets at mile marker 136.21. Located near the Pearre Station parking lot for the Western Maryland Rail Trail and along Pearre Road in Washington County, Maryland. Lock 56 construction began in 1837. The lock was not finished until around 1848 due to financial struggles by the canal company. A general store used to sit over the bypass flume on the far side, which if you look over in that direction, you see this big patch of bamboo. That was the area where the general store used to sit. The large house that sat there eventually was abandoned and left to deteriorate, and the National Park Service eventually tore down the house. Now, this house was eventually occupied by the lockkeeper here, but the original lockkeeper's house actually is right here, on it's set along the towpath here on the opposite side of the lock, and it's still here and it's maintained by the Park Service today. Now, if you look over here, it's beyond them vehicles sitting over there. There's actually a wooded lot over there. There used to be a house that occupied that location as well, but it has since now deteriorated and fell down. Now, on the trip to Georgetown, the Caroline of Williamsport, who has our crew that we have been following on these different videos on the C&O Canal, including our naturalist Vagabond, Captain Koss, the first mate Pick, and all that stuff. The Caroline of Williamsport passed through this lock, and that was operated by a lockkeeper that most likely at that time probably lived in this house right here, and his family also lived here as well. They would maintain a little garden here to help feed their family, and they were provided this housing, and it was part of their compensation for being here to run the lock systems. Not far from the lock, sitting in the underbrush on the opposite side of the canal ditch, still stands an old brick chimney, which you can see in the very distance over there. Many miss this site along the canal, but the story it tells is absolutely amazing. A large plot of land, including almost all of Sidling Hill Mountain, Sidling Hill Creek, and in the extreme western part of the Allegheny County, Maryland, was owned by Charles Carroll. Charles Carroll was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was also the last signer to die. And if anyone has ever watched the Disney movie National Treasure, knows that Charles Carroll is the one who gave Thomas Gates the clue to the Charlotte to lead the Gates family to the Templar treasure. Now, all jokes aside, Charles Carroll actually did exist, and he did sign the Declaration of Independence, and he was also the last signer to pass away, which happened in 1832. This plot of land fell into the hands of his granddaughters, Elizabeth, Mary Ann, Louisa, and Emily Canton. In May 1816, Elizabeth, Mary Ann, and Louisa traveled to England on a European adventure in which all three women became involved in London society and was given the collective nickname the Three Graces. Each of the Three Graces married into British aristocracy. All this despite being raised in a Catholic family. Mary Ann married the Earl of Mornington, Louisa married the 7th Duke of Leeds, and Elizabeth married the 8th Baron of Stanford. Their grandfather's gift of this large plot of land in western Maryland was to become a source of income for the sisters, which originally seemed very lucrative. It turned out it wasn't. Of the land that was supposed to produce timber and anthracite coal, its secret only laid in clay for brickmaking. This brick chimney is all that is left of the Canton Brickworks. Commissioned by Elizabeth, the Lady Stanford, wife of the Baron of Stanford, this brick kiln factory would bring clay over a tram road from a tunnel and heat the clay to manufacture bricks. Besides a tavern called Deer Crossing Inn located in Gideon's Hollow, the Canton Brickworks was the only source of financial gain in which this plot of land was actually used for the three Canton sisters. Elizabeth never returned to the United States, and she also never visited her brickworks, and she died in 1862. Located at mile 136.56, just a short ride from the lock and brickworks that we were just at, is Sidling Hill Aqueduct. The 8th out of 11 total aqueducts along the C&O Canal, Sidling Hill Aqueduct is an arched bridge to allow the canal waterway to travel over Sidling Hill Creek, which I'm standing on the aqueduct, and that's the creek behind me there. And you can see over in this direction too, you can see the creek. The arch is asymmetrical, as it is not a complete arch, as it stretches 110 feet over the creek's width. Sidling Hill Creek carries cold mountain water out of Bedford County, Pennsylvania, and then it dumps it into the Potomac River right here, which this is actually the mouth of Sidling Hill Creek. As it meanders across Maryland, Sidling Hill Creek marks the boundary between Washington County and Allegheny County, Maryland. Now, the aqueduct has suffered wear over the years as floodwaters and time has deteriorated the structure. The upstream parapet that held water in the canal has collapsed, and the stone structure is now reinforced by steel bracing to help preserve it. And if you look here below me, that is the stone parapet, or at least what it used to be. And of course now its rocks are actually missing. Despite this, the aqueduct is actually still in pretty good shape, even having some of the original railing still attached to the towpath, which is right here. Now, above the aqueduct is the original bridge for the Western Maryland Railroad that now serves as a way for the asphalt-covered Western Maryland Rail Trail to cross the creek. And you can see the new part of the bridge built for the rail trail up there. Now, notice the high water mark located on the bridge, way over the position that I currently stand at today on top of the stone aqueduct structure. It's amazing the water was actually that high, and this stone arch is still standing. Now, below the railroad bridge is a concrete structure. That structure down there is the boat launch for the old Senequippi Boy Scout camp that used to occupy the land just over there. Senequippi occupied this area until the mid-20th century, when it moved its location to Fort Littleton, Pennsylvania, where it still operates today. Downstream along the Potomac was Dam Number 6, which was a wooden crib dam. It caused high, calm water to be backed up the whole way upriver to here, where Boy Scouts could easily launch canoes and swim. When Dam Number 6 was burnt by mistake by fishermen in 1936, and floodwaters in 1936 and 1942 washed out that dam, Senequippi lost their swimming and boating waterway as the water lowered in the mouth of the Sidling Hill Creek, and so the Boy Scouts had to find a new home, which is their current home in Fort Littleton.
Going up the canal a little bit. No Allegheny alligators.
I've never seen an Allegheny alligator
this would
in this
probably
place.
be a good place to see him, though. Right here he comes. Yep, there he is.
Yeah, do you see how red he is? Like,
It's a pretty big turtle too. From up here he looks, maybe like that big, but down there he might be, more like that. Oh, I think that boat or whatever spooked him. See him? There he goes. Pretty sweet.
So a little upstream from the aqueduct is a bridge built to connect the asphalt-covered Western Maryland Rail Trail with the C&O Canal. Completed in 2019, this section of the rail trail stretched past Little Orleans, Maryland, from its former endpoint at Pearre Station, which is where Lock 56 is. But this came with a caveat. It had an obstacle it had to go around, and so had to join with the towpath trail to skirt around that obstacle. What is that obstacle? Well, you will find out. Feel for a cold breeze. Just a little ride from Sidling Hill, you may hit a cold patch of air along the towpath with a strange, slight smell of creosote. There is no ghost or mysterious thing here, as some may claim, only the entrance to a dark, man-made cavern that was a part of modern engineering that helped put the C&O Canal out of business. At mile 138.06, you will find a small path, which is right here behind me, that climbs across the canal ditch and up the steep bank on the opposite side, leading to the east portal of the Indigo Tunnel. Built in 1904, the Indigo Tunnel helped connect Hagerstown to Cumberland along the Maryland side of the Potomac River with rail travel. To bypass a large bend in the river, the railroad decided to hollow out the mountain to create the longest tunnel on this stretch of the railroad, 4,350 feet long. The tunnel was in use from 1906, when rail traffic began on the line, until the line was abandoned in 1975 after the Western Maryland Railroad merged with the C&O and B&O railroads. The National Park Service acquired the tunnel in 1980 to help preserve it. The tunnel went through a refurbish in the 1960s, which explains why its timbers are in such good shape inside the tunnel, keeping itself intact over the years, despite other tunnels along this line crumbling and even caving in. In 2010, the Indigo Tunnel was deemed to be the largest bat habernaculum in Maryland, being home to 8 different species of bats. According to an article on canaltrust.org, each of these bats eat over 1,000 insects an hour during the summer months and provide $53 billion worth of ecosystem services to the agricultural industry just in pest control alone. This is why Indigo Tunnel now has bat gates on it, and entering it is prohibited. Personally, I have never run into a bat in the Indigo Tunnel, but I have seen a lot of pigeons. An old tale from this area tells of a local walking from Pearre Station to Little Orleans to work using the Indigo Tunnel as a shortcut without the use of a lantern or a light. One day, a train engine stopped to pick this man up, giving him a ride through the tunnel. Upon entering the tunnel, the man was astonished to see as the engine's light beamed into the darkness and uncovered a blanket of rattlesnakes covering the tunnel floor. The man never took that shortcut again. This section of the canal, around mile 138.63, widens as the river bend pulls the canal away from the hills and opens up to allow more room for passing boats and mooring for the night as the canal crew rests from a long day's trek. Now, this section of the canal is usually a swamp during the rainy seasons and becomes home to all kinds of wildlife such as box and painted turtles and the dreaded snapping turtle. Birds will flock here as well, and deer would occupy the grassy clearing on the other side of the ditch. And this is truly a place of beauty for the lover of nature in this section of the canal. Completed in late 1840 by James Pearre, Lock 57 is the last of the masonry stone locks built for some distance on the canal. The canal was running out of funding, so they were forced to find cheaper methods to construct locks as they went. If you look closely, you can still see the remnants of the lock doors laying in the bottom of the lock itself even today. Now the upper part of the lock, which is this part here on the riverside, was repaired with concrete, and the stones that were removed were piled up behind the lock house. Now the lock house that once stood here was a 2.5-story log house with this stone foundation that is still here today with this chimney. Now the lockkeeper and his family no longer occupy this land, but it has now become home to the Indigo Neck hiker-biker campsite, where hikers and bikers of the C&O Canal Historical Park can rest and sleep after a long day's travels, as long as the train doesn't wake you up, of course. Because there's just this random chicken egg just sitting there with a fly on it inside the fireplace.
Yeah, I think that's...
I don't know.
I would assume if it was more active, it would actually have a nest bed around it. Literally, it's just sitting there, so...
Just random chicken egg. So the question is either where's the chicken, or who put the chicken egg?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have the campsite right there, so some kid could literally have just, you know, or adult, drunk off his ass. Egg!
Could you camp in this if you wanted to?
Well, the campground's technically over there, but I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't.
And you got an open door passageway. You could literally set up right here, and then, you know, you'd be environmentally protected for wind and stuff for the most part, and, you know.
At mile 140.03, you will find another bridge to connect the Western Maryland Rail Trail with the C&O Canal. After traveling the river bend known as Indigo Neck, the traveler of the rail trail can go back to their easy ride on the asphalt after bypassing the bat haven known as the Indigo Tunnel. So that means at the top of this bridge is the west portal of the Indigo Tunnel. And a sign that we're getting closer to that drink. The sign says Bills. At mile 140.77, we come to the 15 Mile Creek Drive-In Campground. The campground and its attached parking lot and boat ramp is a perfect place to launch and take out kayaks and canoes onto the Potomac River. This is the usual takeout spot for anyone doing the gorgeous 21-mile paddle on what is known as the Paw Paw Bends, as the Potomac snakes through the mountainous country of West Virginia and Western Maryland. The campground gets its name from 15 Mile Creek that empties into the Potomac at this location. The unique name comes from its location along the Old Town Road, and no, we are not talking Little Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus. This Old Town Road was built as a military connection between Fort Frederick and Fort Cumberland, and during the French and Indian War. The committee to form this road was headed by Colonel Thomas Cresap, with the intentions of keeping the military road entirely in the province of Maryland, to avoid dangerous river crossings across the Potomac. And yes, this is the same Thomas Cresap that spawned the famous border war between Pennsylvania and Maryland, as shown in my videos on the Mason and Dixon line. And I would recommend you checking those out. That was an interesting adventure. Now this new road was necessary as the old road was extremely rough. It was so rough that a young surveyor named George Washington wrote in 1743, "I believe ye worst road that was ever trod by man or beast." Where the Old Town Road crossed 15 Mile Creek was 15 miles from Hancock, Maryland, and 15 miles from Town Creek, located near Old Town, Maryland today. Hence, the creek became known as 15 Mile Creek. The C&O Canal crosses the creek with the 9th aqueduct on the canal, called 15 Mile Creek Aqueduct, which is where we're at here. Completed between 1848 and 1850, this aqueduct is in very good condition for its age. It even still has the parapet upriver, unlike Sidling Hill that we were just at. It spans 110 foot and is very similar to Sidling Hill Creek Aqueduct that we visited earlier. Just above and off the trail is the little town of Little Orleans, Maryland. In the remote wilderness of western Maryland, Little Orleans is a shadow of its former self during the heyday of the C&O Canal. However, it has not lost any of its character, as you shall see. Legend has it that Little Orleans got its name from a French fur trader that named the area on the West Virginia side of the river after his hometown of Orleans, France. That area became known as Orleans Crossroads. With a ford crossing the river here, connecting both sides of the river, a small settlement sprang up on the Maryland side, and it's called Little Orleans. The area of Little Orleans found prominence as a stop along the Old Town Military Road. Now, a small band of Irish Catholics found their way to the frontier of Western Maryland shortly after the defeat of the Native American forces during the French and Indian War in the 1760s. They settled along 15-Mile Creek, seeking religious freedom in a colony that persecuted members of the Catholic faith. It wasn't until the establishment of the Bill of Rights under the United States Constitution that Maryland fully lifted their restrictions on Catholicism. With the construction of the canal, even more Irish immigrants seeking work on the canal's construction project moved into the area around Little Orleans. Upon a period where they were not being paid for their labors after a downturn in the economy, the Irishman laborers organized a work stoppage which caused canal building contractors to hire German laborers. To combat their replacements, Irish clashed with Germans on May 17, 1838, as one German worker was nearly clubbed to death by Irish shillelaghs, and another German was tossed in a fire and almost burned to death. 50 duck guns were purchased from Baltimore by the riotous Irish and distributed to Irish laborers from Little Orleans to Paw Paw, West Virginia. After a riot near the Paw Paw Tunnel, 3 state militia companies from Baltimore were sent in to quell the riots, confiscating and destroying the guns, burned down the Irish shanties, and took their whiskey. This successfully quieted the riot for a time, but non-rioting Irish sued due to their whiskey being illegally seized from their homes without a warrant by government officials. And the court ruled in their favor, saying that the militia overstepped their bounds. In August and September of 1839, riots continued as militia from Allegheny and Washington counties were forced to once again seize firearms, destroy shanties and shops, and arrest 26 leaders of the riots, eventually hauling them to Cumberland to face trial. The Irish spirit lives on here in Little Orleans, as just a short distance from the C&O Canal sits St. Patrick's Catholic Church. Hiding from persecution, Catholics practiced their faith in secret in Little Orleans, eventually building a mass house disguised as a humble home that housed the priests. With a dream to build an actual church, the locals got their wish in 1860 when money was put up to erect the church by none other than Elizabeth Canton, the Lady Stanford. With other donations, the question was where to build it. On top of a hill in Little Orleans that we just painstakingly walked up sat an old cemetery that held many of the local Irish Catholic dead. With the age of the cemetery, many of the gravestones were missing, so it was decided to keep the site holy by building the church over top of the old cemetery. St. Patrick's is 16.5 feet wide, 72 feet long, and 18.5 feet high, and made of red brick, possibly made from the Canton brickworks that we saw earlier, in which the walls contain tall Gothic arch windows. This humble church of the prominent Irish faith bears the insignia of those people that settled here. The church gable is adorned with a panel bearing a famous Irish symbol, a green shamrock. Before we come to the end of our little journey to Little Orleans, we cannot forget the iconic location known as Bill's Place, which is the building that sits below me here. There are records of stores and taverns here as early as 1795, when King's Tavern operated out of Little Orleans. In 1811, Mrs. O'Queen also kept a tavern here. But in 1896, a general store was actually located next to the canal that operated as a warehouse and a loading wharf for canal boats. After the turn of the 20th century, this warehouse was removed from the canal shores and was moved over here closer to the town so the Western Maryland Railroad could run their line through the town, which we're standing right now on what used to be the Western Maryland Railroad. It's now the rail trail. But in order to make way for this to come through, they moved the building closer to town over here. In the 1960s, Bill Schrodendel, which hopefully I got that pronounced right, and his wife Ethel began to operate the store. In 1972, he added a bar and a restaurant to it. Soon, the bar became known as Bill's Place, where hunters, fishermen, bikers, hikers, ramblers, and motorcyclists met to converse over a good meal and rest from a day's hard labor. An old tradition of putting signed dollar bills on the ceiling, a tradition possibly stemming from canal days where broke canalers were guaranteed a drink at the Little Orleans Tavern with the help of their signed greenback tacked to the ceiling. This tradition still lives on at Bill's Place. The ceiling was covered in signed dollar bills. The old building burnt down in 2000, destroying a piece of history and tens of thousands of dollars on the ceiling. Bill rebuilt the restaurant as it continued to be a place of rest and meeting and a center of this sleepy little town, still maintaining his business hours on his door that was solely dependent upon his fishing schedule. Bill passed away on January the 5th, 2013. But he is still honored at his place of business with a banner over top the bar that reads, "Gone Fishing, Bill, January the 5th, 2013. Bill's Place is full of character, as the bar is adorned with mounts of game and fish, colorful signs, and a memo above the kitchen door that says, "This is not Burger King. You get the SOB our way, or you don't get it at all." And it is signed by the management. This is clearly a joke, because they always give me a choice of what to put on my cheeseburger here. And yes, the ceiling is once again covered in signed dollar bills, many signed by the hundreds, if not thousands, of motorcycle enthusiasts that don this little town in August every year for East Coast Sturgis, a biker event that asks you to come, camp, and party, and who ask you to be 21 or over and bring no dogs, no fireworks, no colors, no weapons, no ATVs, and no attitudes. Currently operated by Jack, Bill's son, Bill's Place is a great place to rest from a day's ride or walk on the C&O Canal, grab a beer, get a great meal, and kick back with the locals. You may even see a local Catholic priest walk into a bar, and that is no joke. The C&O Canal is a modern national treasure that stretches 184.5 miles and is chock full of history and unique stories. We only saw 5 miles of it today. What else can you discover on the C&O Canal? Thank you for watching this video. If you like what you saw, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Remember, these stories are ours, and it is our duty to keep these stories alive. I'll see you next time as I explore What in the History.
I wonder how that works with insurance.
Yeah, with insurance, so all the extra cash that was,
Well, once in a while, people come in here.